Why, hey there, geographers, and welcome back to the Mr. Sin channel. Now, today what I'm going to do is just go over one FRQ. I'm going to break it down. I'm going to use one of the FRQs from the 2018 AP Human Geography test. The goal of this video is to help you just see how you could format an FRQ and write one. Now, I'm going to be using the FRQ and typing it online since our test this year is online. I'm also not going to be writing it live because that'll make a really long video. So what I'm going to do is just kind of explain my thought process as going through an FRQ. Hopefully this will help you better understand how to handle some stimulus questions. So, a little awkward, but after filming this multiple times, the face cam just didn't work. Now, I tried filming this on my desktop and used my webcam, but turns out that, well, there was no visuals. So, you're going to see the screen, you'll see what I'm typing, and you'll be able to hear what I'm saying, but you're not going to see like me animated going back and forth. But that's okay, the content is still there, and it's still great. Okay, let's go into now how we're going to break down these FRQs.
Okay, so I have the 2018 FRQ up on the screen right now. Now, the first thing you are going to do when you open your FRQ is not go down to A, B, C and start answering the questions. No, that is not, we're not going to do that mistake. Geographers, you know better. We are going to look at our data that is being presented. We are going to look at the statement and we're going to read the directions. We're going to make sure we have an understanding of what we talk about. So let's look at this statement first. Right here for number one is our first statement. This is what we want to focus on because this is what our question is going to be about. So I can see here, women compose between 1/3 and 1/2 of all agricultural laborers in the developing countries. And yet, empowerment and gender equality has been difficult to achieve. So right away, you should be thinking, okay, this is going to deal with economics. It's going to deal with politics, culture. We're going to be using data. We're going to be looking here at this map. Right away, too, you can see, okay, the map is showing, and now we're going up to the map, and this is going to be important. Percentage of women in the labor force working in agriculture. So you want to check the title of the map right away. This will allow you to see what data is being shown. Then we go to our legend, so we understand exactly what is happening. What do these colors here mean? What's all this fancy stuff going on? And now we're getting ready to actually answer it. But before you even do that, before we start going down to ABC, start thinking to yourself a little bit, okay, what might this be about? I can see here we're looking, for the most part, it seems like LDCs, our less developed countries, predominantly in parts of Africa, have the highest amount of women in agriculture working there. We can see that for the most part, the majority of the developed world, Europe, the United States, and also not even just the core countries, but also some of the semi-periphery or the periphery also too are, well, not really having that many women in the agricultural workforce. So that's important to note. Also, we could look to at India and China. They're not in that 76 to 98%, but they're definitely in that 51 to 75. So these are some things for us to notice. Okay, we've spent some time looking at the map now. We're breaking it down. We've looked at our statement. We know we're going to be talking here about a variety of topics around gender, particularly women and empowerment. So now we're on to actually answering our question. And if you notice, I have a new document up. This is going to be my document that I type all my work in. Now, in the real AP test, you're not going to necessarily want to copy over the map and also the question that you're answering. I've done this so when we're practicing, you can see what I'm talking about and referencing. But on the real test, you want to have just kind of two windows open and just kind of glance back and forth. Copying everything over is going to take you too much time, and you don't want to waste your time. Also, if you notice, I have already Mr. Sin on the top. I've got my fake, this is not a real number, but my fake e-ticket number there, my page number. My document is ready to go. So when I'm taking my test, I can start writing right away. I don't have to waste with the prep work. So make sure you have that prep work completed in advance. Now, another thing too you'll notice is I already have an A here. You want to make sure that your answers are organized. You want to make sure that when the AP reader is reading your work, they know exactly what you're talking about, where your information is connecting to. So I'm going to be making sure that happens. So A is going to connect to A. Now for here, this is an identify question. We can see A is saying identify a country where more than 75% of the women in the labor force are active in agriculture. Nice thing for 2020 is there is no identify. So this one really you don't have to worry about focusing on. Really what you would do if we're going to type something here, we might put that, all right, one country that has more than 75% of the women in the population of the field of agriculture would be Madagascar. Here, I'm looking at the map above. I am referencing then anything that is in this top range here, the 76 to 98, and I would be then answering it. So I could also go in with Afghanistan, Angola, Uganda. There's tons of different countries that you could use here. The big focus, though, for questions like this is you don't want to just do bullet points. You want to make sure you're writing complete sentences. And that is something for the 2020 test as well. If you get a describe, a compare, and explain, you want to be writing in sentences. Don't just list everything. So for B, we can see it saying for each of the following 3 categories, describe one obstacle that may prevent women working in agriculture from achieving greater equality and empowerment. Now, the focus here is going to be these 3 categories. And notice it specifically said 3. You have to provide 3 examples. And the focus here is going to be on obstacles. So we're talking about obstacles here. We're talking about these categories. This is going to be important. One area where students lose points is they don't actually answer what the question is saying. So we need to connect to each one of these categories. I can't just give 3 examples of obstacles that are all economic or all political or all cultural. You have to make sure you have 1 in each category. So that's important. This year for the 2020 test, make sure you read your questions carefully. Look at those task verbs. Look at exactly what it's asking you to do, and then go on to answer it. So let's go down now and actually start answering. We'll start with the economic focus. Again, I've typed all my answers in advance, so that way this video will be a little bit shorter and you can focus more on studying instead of watching me type everything out. But when I was thinking of economics, one of the things I thought about was actually education. Oftentimes, women are denied opportunities in the workforce, and it's due to a lack of formal education. This prevents them from having the skills needed to advance in the workforce, thus forcing them to do household work or stay in agricultural professions. Now, notice the theme really about what I'm talking about here is around a lack of education, thus not allowing them to be able to advance in the economy and to be able to participate in other economic sectors. I am connecting it back to our agricultural, because they're talking about agriculture here within the prompt, so that's kind of important. And I'm only really talking about one obstacle, and that's because, again, our prompt is only telling me to. Sure, I could talk about a bunch of other obstacles that women face. I could talk about healthcare. I could talk about actually how they oftentimes get denied to loans or don't have the financial support. But I don't need to, because I only need to focus on one obstacle. This year, the test is at home. It's timed, every year it's timed, but we don't have that luxury to be able to type a paragraph of everything. I just need to answer what the question's asking me. That's it. Now we're moving into culture. And one of the things to notice is that we're talking about cultural factors here. So we don't want to address economic ones again. We've already done that with our first bullet point. Also notice too, my bullet point for culture is still B. I'm not continuing on to C. If you wanted to, what I would actually recommend is put a little 1 here. So B1, B2, B3, so that the reader can specifically see what you're talking about within the question. The more transparent you are with your answer, the easier it is for the reader to read. And if they can read it, they can grade it. And that's important. Last thing you want is your information all over the place, and then they can't figure out, did you actually answer the question or not? So let's look at what I came up for culture. Culture, I have women in countries that have agricultural-based economies often are less developed in the demographic transition model and are more prone to viewing women as caretakers. Oftentimes, putting traditional gender roles on women prevents them from advancing in society. So here I'm talking a little bit about essentially how men are viewed differently as women. And when we reference back to that demographic transition model, I'm making the connection because here women are really in that agricultural field. We know that as countries advance in the demographic transition model, women start to gain more rights. We start to see more development, eventually shifting more into manufacturing and eventually a service-based economy. With stages 3 and 4 really is where women start to see that kind of empowerment as society now starts to create more laws that make it legal for them to vote and own land and give them more opportunities. But stage 2, less developed countries, they are still seen as caretakers, often referencing that they're doing work at home or they're doing unpaid labor or they're doing work in the agricultural practices. So here I'm just referencing one particular aspect of culture. We could also look at other things as well. So we could look at social norms. We could look at environmental hazards. We could look at how society actually raises children, all these different things we could talk about. But this, again, we only have to focus on one obstacle. All right, let's go on to our last part of B, which is going to be political. So here I came up with politically, we can see obstacles to women empowerment be put up in the form of unequal laws. This takes place in the form of preventing women from voting, owning land, or providing access to women to escape impoverished conditions. Here, what I'm talking about really is how politics or how the government might actually hinder women from moving forward. And I actually reference a variety of things that laws would do that would stop women from moving forward. One thing to focus again, and hopefully you've kind of noticed this already, but the prompt is only asking for obstacles. We're not talking about ways that the laws or the economy or culture would empower women. So it's also why you're noticing I've only talked about things that are hindering women because the prompt is only asking for it. I don't need to go into all the other aspects. And other things I could talk about here too for political could be like armed conflicts. I could talk about unequal access to programs. I could get into actually policy makers not actually being representative of the female population due to it maybe being all male. And so they don't allow then for women's issues to come up. All those different things I could talk about. Again, though, I only have to talk about one main topic. So this would be actually a great answer for B. I'm broken into my 3 parts. Again, I would recommend on the actual test this year, maybe you put B, 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 or you put B1, B2, B3, or even like at least state, hey, I'm talking about the economic, I'm talking about the cultural, I'm talking about the political. That way that reader knows you're talking about each of them. And really, it's a way for you too to make sure that you're talking about 3 different categories. Oftentimes students here, what they do is they get excited and they're stressed out because during a test, your brain isn't thinking rationally, especially on a timed AP test. So you start just thinking, okay, I just need to talk about 3 obstacles. Cool. And you just talk about all economic or 2 economic and 1 cultural, and you forget political, or you don't talk enough in depth that you're showing the actual concept. So this is a way to even help you out. Slow down, take it 1 question at a time, and break your answer up. Okay, let's finish this now with C. Okay, so now we're on to C, our last part. Here we have identify and explain 1 impact of empowering women within the rural agricultural regions of developing countries. Now, again, big thing to focus on here. It's only asking for 1. So we don't have to go into a bunch of different examples. Unlike B that had 3 different sections here or parts, this one we only have to talk about 1 thing. We can also see our focus here is now on empowering. We are not talking about obstacles. So that's going to be important. The other thing that we should point out here too is we are talking about agricultural regions of developing countries. This is something too that students have lost points on in the past. What they go into, let's go with orange. Why not? Now we got a bunch of different colors there. They'll start talking about other parts of the world. The question here is specifically asking for developing countries, LDCs. So we do not want to go into other aspects of the world. Okay, let's see what I came up with. So when I was thinking about this prompt, one of the things here that I talked about was this. When women in the developing world are empowered and given more rights, we start to see society become more economically advanced. This is because women are allowed to participate in the economy, take out loans, start businesses, and go to school. This allows for new innovation and a more competitive workforce. This will also reduce the TFR of a country, which in turn reduces the NRI, allowing for a more stable population growth. This is because women are not allowed to participate in society and no longer just seen as child bearers. So this is important to understand. Notice here, I'm providing a lot of detail. I am explaining my thought process. The reader, when reading this, would be able to see, okay, here's what happens when they get more rights. We're talking about the economy becomes more advanced. Why does it become more advanced? Because now I'm talking about the loans. I'm talking about how they can start businesses, how they can go to school. I even elaborate and go further, talking about innovation and a more competitive workforce, and then connect to a second point, which really you probably won't have to do. But now I'm going into, okay, it could also reduce the TFR of a country, which in turn reduces the NIR, And again, then I add the because, and it's because they are now allowed to participate in society and they're not seen as child bearers. You're adding detail, and explain questions here, because this is an explain, has a because. You have to provide logic, evidence, reasoning. You're trying to show the entire concept. You can't just describe what's happening. I can't just define it. I have to show the reader that I understand relationship. Event 1 happens because of event 2. We have cause and effect, this back and forth.
I hope that helped. That was a really quick look at just going through an FRQ. Now, there's a bunch of different ways you could answer that FRQ. Remember, when you're taking the FRQs this year, take them slow. Read the questions carefully. Focus on exactly what it's asking. If you need a refresher on those task verbs, watch my video that I posted the other day. It goes over the task verbs for the FRQs for the 2020 test. Those are going to be really important to understand because you will have to know them. That way you can make sure you answer the question correctly. Now, make sure you subscribe to the channel because tomorrow I'm going to be coming out with a video that goes over a bunch of different tips and tricks for you to get a 5 on the AP test. I've been reading through all these old tests, trying to see where students have been making mistakes. And I've come up with a list that I think will help you out. So I'm going to go actually film that video now, edit it, and get it up by tomorrow. Thanks for watching, geographers. Remember, you can do this. You're going to rock this AP test this year. Have confidence in yourselves. Okay, until next time, I'm Mr. Sin, and I'll see you online.